Welcome to the third part of this trilogy, and thanks for sticking around for the series. I know you're dying to find out how it all ends. Unless, of course, you skipped either or both of the previous episodes and are wondering what the hell is going on. Let me state here and now that this episode might seem the most disjointed and confusing of the three, but there is an actual point in the end. Sometimes to get to your final destination, you have to take the long way around. This episode is related to the topic of trans tots and teens. But I first want to talk about thorium. Thorium is a weakly radioactive element with an unusual past. During the German military administration in occupied France during World War II, one group of German scientists stole all the thorium they could while in occupied France. The Alsace mission thought that they were using the heavy element for the refinement of uranium to be used in atomic bombs. But they were only interested in using the thorium after the war in a patented brand of German toothpaste. Doramad radioactive toothpaste's radioactive content was promoted as imparting health benefits, including antibacterial action and a contribution to strengthening the defense of teeth and gums. Just a few years earlier in France, thorium and radium were key components in Thioradia Cosmetics, a whole product line of perfumes, creams, facial powders, lipsticks, and other beauty products. Again, in the 1940s, Germany also made a radioactive chocolate bar containing radium. If you look at this grouping of products with today's knowledge and today's understanding of science and medicine, any rational person would not touch any of these products with a 10-foot cattle prod. I do not even have to take a poll on this to know that greater than 99% of the people listening to this would express severe concerns if they saw any of these items in their local grocery store. Keep this detail in mind as we progress on to part 2. This is a controversial one, so watch out for the proverbial flying. From the independence of Ireland in the 1920s up until the early 1990s, most of the country could be described at best as second world conditions, with very little money in the economy to circulate through the population. There was relatively little industrial growth until the latter half of the 20th century, as Ireland remained a mainly agricultural-based economy. There was a problem in Ireland in the time before social welfare was even conceived. The society had a moral obligation to take care of unwed mothers and their children. The only alternatives facing families who could not afford to take care of these extra responsibilities was to either throw the woman out on the street, which no one with today's conscience can contemplate, or to have them placed in the institutions which had been set up by the government called the Magdalen Laundries. In these facilities, the women were fed and sheltered while labouring with laundry up to and through pregnancy. Like a lot of ideas that seemed good at the time and were probably started with the best of intentions, it is currently viewed with revulsion. People viewing these facilities, the conditions, and the oversight of the woman with today's morals have completely crucified anyone who had any part in it. However, the people looking at the situation from today's perspective never seem to take into account the fact that it was not until the 1970s that Ireland introduced a means-tested allowance for unmarried mothers. They seem not to understand that housing benefits for single mothers was really not a thing until approximately the 1980s. Am I going to say that abuses did not occur in these facilities? No, of course not. But the state of the general population was not much better at the time. I have gone through 2 sets of cases now where society has had a paradigm shift from popular acceptance to popular loathing, due mostly to the passage of time, the gain of knowledge, and the loss of any context. So let us turn our eye to today's popular trend and the topic of this video. Yes, that was a long introduction even by my standards. It does not take much today to find something about trans kids in the newspapers. If you pick up 3 random daily rags, you're very likely to find at least one story, and probably more, relating to transitioning teens or tots. Is no one else disturbed by this? One of the current trends, which is most disturbing to me, is parents even going beyond the sexualization of a child to a point where the child's sexual identity is diminished or outright destroyed. Let me clarify. I am sure that a lot of you have heard of Munchausen syndrome. This is a psychological condition where a person intentionally harms themselves in order to get attention, an exploitation of the care and sympathy from others. There is an extension of this syndrome called Munchausen's by proxy. In this case, the person with the psychological condition harms somebody close to them, normally their child, and then they gain the aforementioned care and sympathy from others by showing how hard they are working to try to heal their victim. I am not a psychologist, but from the outside looking at the parents whoring their kids' supposed gender dysphoria to the press, it is hard not to draw parallels. To be blunt, in my opinion, when an individual is over 18, and if they can afford the gender swap surgery, who am I to stand in the way of slicing off the old bits and sticking new prosthetics on? I have no right to tell Mrs. Jenner she's going down the wrong path, as Caitlin has her own opinion, and I have mine. The same sentiment cannot be shared for those under the age limits. It is difficult to convince me that a 10-year-old can make such a life-changing decision as so-called transitioning, whenever legally they are not considered competent enough to do something as basic as voting. Yes, a cross on a ballot takes so much thought. However, let me bring this back to my earlier points, as well as my previous 2 videos, and ask the parents how they will feel when the pendulum swings against the trans trend. How will society judge the parents who willfully have their children sterilized for no other reason than it's what the kids felt like at the time? There will be blame to share with the doctors who flaunt their Hippocratic oath to administer medicines, hormones, or perform the surgeries. Currently, though, the legal and moral responsibility for children's health and well-being lies on the shoulders of the parents. The excuse, "It's what my child begged for," will not fly, as the parents are responsible to protect their kids from themselves as well as from external harm. The harm is already visible. Take the case of Patrick Mitchell, a 12-year-old boy who decided he was really a female, so he started taking puberty-blocking hormones to prevent the usual transition. His mother then thought it was a fantastic idea to start feeding her child her estrogen tablets for 2 years, until at the age of 14 he changed his mind again and stated he really wanted to actually be a male. The totality of the physical and emotional damage done to this child cannot be readily assessed, as it will take years until it becomes apparent. As I have stated time and time again, I am not making this series to attack the trans community, but to try to make them face up to the consequences and show them where they have responsibilities for what is currently happening and what is about to happen. In the end, society is hardwired to protect children, so the backlash for those propagating the trans activism will be twice as severe for those targeting kids. Think the public response to Jimmy Savile's activities on steroids. On hindsight, maybe I should have started with that analogy. I hope this is a trilogy that you found worth listening to and maybe revisiting again another time. It is definitely one that will get me into trouble. If you find these thoughts worth hearing and want to listen to more, feel free to subscribe. I also don't mind if you want to share my videos on your social media. Comments and ratings welcome below.